Hey there, everyone. How's it going? Happy Wednesday. It is the weekly aha moments with myself, moi, the integrative awareness coach. How is it going? We are in December and we are rounding the corner of 2022. Can you believe it? I think in 2020, many of us said this is the weirdest year ever. And then in 2021, we're like, maybe 2021 is the weirdest year ever. And now we're hitting 2022 or wrapping it up at least in the next, gosh, 20 days or so. And right now I'm like, I think 2022 is pretty weird. When I say weird, I don't, I just mean uncharted territory. Let's just say that. So today I wanted to check in with you, make a couple announcements before I get started. I'm still getting over my cold, so forgive my nose. It looks a little red. And yeah, so forgive me if I sound a little nasally or I cough. It could happen. But I'm trying to keep warm and cozy um, and drink lots of hot tea. So, um, anyways, a couple things. I just posted my podcast for this week. It was called Ground Zero, and I'm going to share with you a little bit about that. This is the first time that I made it into a video. So there's the recorded version where you can just listen to the audio, and then there's also the video version, which I'm still working the kinks out, so forgive me. Um, the video version I posted here on my Facebook page, the Mind Heart Space page, the link to the YouTube version, which is the video version, but you can still access the audio on Spotify. So, one of my goals this year that I wanted to share with you coming up, not to get ahead of myself, but one of my goals for 2023 um, is to source my listenership to I can't remember what I said now, and now I'm feeling nervous because I think I said to um, 10,000 listeners in 2023. So if you feel motivated to support me in that, I'd love for you to head over to Spotify and follow my podcast. Um, I have been dedicated to producing an episode for you each week. Now, I must say, last week when I was sick, I didn't I didn't make an episode. So I think the majority of weeks I have shown up. And it's something I do. It's my passion project. It's something that I love. So I do it. And I think there was probably, I don't know how many times, probably 3 or 4 times I missed a week because of other commitments that I had. Um, so I'd really appreciate your support on my goal. And of course, I always like to hear your comments or feedback. It helps me fine tune, refine my messages, and gives me ideas for episodes that you're interested in hearing about. So that's one announcement. The second announcement is every year, at the end of the year, I take some time. This has been my own personal project for years. I've done this, and I've always invited my friends to join me. And you're my friend if you're listening to this. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a special free event. I haven't picked the day yet. Um, maybe on the weekend because more people are available, or a weeknight. I don't know. Let me know your preference. And it's going to be maybe an hour-long workshop. I haven't decided. And what we do is we take some time to reflect on all of the things that we accomplished in this previous year. In this case, it would be 2022. Um, the good, the bad, the ugly, um, all the lessons that we've learned, everything that we've gleaned, all the wisdom we've gleaned and that we're taking with us. And this includes sometimes what appears to be um, unfortunate events in our lives actually turn out to be really valuable lessons or teach us something that we wouldn't have learned any other way. And life is funny that way. So, as they say, first it whispers, um, then it gets a little bit louder and we still don't listen. It hits us over the head with a 2x4. And some of us are slow, some of us are stubborn, some of us just aren't listening because we're afraid of change. Um, but life will have its way with us in one way or the other. So let me know if you're interested in that and participating in that activity. Um, so once we do our 2020 review, we it's kind of like ground zero, as a matter of fact. We reflect on um, the lay of the land of our lives, the landscape, the the horizon that's in front of us, and what are we wanting to create there? What are we wanting to um, grow in our lives? And so I wanted to mention that to you. And today, um, the main thing that I wanted to share with you is on the topic of the podcast, which I posted earlier today called Ground Zero. And it's, like I said, a lot of the topics I choose are from my own personal growth and work as a life coach, as a way shower, as a person that is helping people overcome obstacles and challenges and support people in their personal growth and development and creating the kind of lives that they want. I'm constantly doing this work myself. I'm in it. If I'm not in it, then nobody I work with is in it. So, um, so this week I shared a little bit in the podcast about clearing clearing the way, um, and being at ground zero and what that means. And in the podcast, I mostly referred to in regards to our relationship to ourselves, our construction of the self, and what causes us to um, have internal conflicts, where we have one part of ourselves saying, yes, I really want to, have a meaningful relationship, or yes, I really want to make this amount of money, or I really want to be at this certain fitness level. And yet, even though we say that we want these things, which is right in alignment for our new year vision, our intentions, there's something in our behavior that says something else. And so, what is that in the middle, in that blind spot of our conscious mind that keeps us resisting what we say that we want? And so, um, this ground zero in which I spoke of is this place of the self and our relationship to it and belonging to that self and its relationship, our relationship to our place in community and where we belong in community. Because our sense of self or disconnection from ourselves, likewise, is a product of our relationships. All wounding happens in relationships. And when I say wounding, I'm referring to false reflections of who we are, using other people's feedback in a way to determine who we are. But we're not, a lot of times, as children, we're not looking at the quality of the reflector, right? Who um, people reflecting back to us have their own wounds. And so the image gets distorted. And so many of us have not only a limited vision of who we are, but a distorted vision of who we are. And that's the wound of having a false sense of self and believing that that's the extent of who we are and not realizing that there's any other version of reality available. Or part of us suspects there is, but we don't know how to get there because we've never done it before. So that's really a lot of what I do in my coaching, is getting past this resistance to what we say that we want. And that means getting to ground zero, the place of clearing. And how do we clear those things? Because a lot of times, right, it's in our neurobiology. It was downloaded in our consciousness before we were 7 years old, right? And a lot of it a lot earlier than that. And so we didn't have a lot of choice. And so really what it is learning, educating yourself about your own nervous system, your own evolutionary survival mechanism that's in your brain that is running many people's lives, and how that's related to triggers and traumas and reproducing the same patterns, even though they might not be fulfilling or giving you the results that you want or the life that you say that you want. And so um, I also share a little bit of how that's related to the energy of this entire year and the clearing that's been going on for me personally. But it's never just personal because we're part of a collective. And all the work that we do individually to clear the shadow self, which is the image produced by the survival brain. So the survival brain in us produces an image that we call ourself, our personality, that our ego relates to, that keeps us safe from what appears to be danger, um, emotional danger, psychospiritual danger, things that it's not able to process. And so all of that is programmed and wired into our brain. And I go into this much more in the podcast about um, how we learn, how patterns are imprinted on our brain. As a classroom teacher for many years, I taught reading. I taught not just children, but adults who had cognitive processing issues. That means the way their brain processed information was divergent from, um, and I don't want to say that because everyone's has a little different way of processing information and we all adapt. Our brain adapts. But looking at how, like a muscle, we can retrain our brain with something called neuroplasticity. Um, and as a um, instructor and educator who was teaching a specific strategy that involved not what people were learning, but the processes that were used to imprint that information through the senses. And it was, I mean, it was just so expansive because it doesn't matter the content. The brain will record it um, if it's imprinted in the correct way. And so all of this experience before even becoming a life coach and being educated formally about cognitive developments and how the brain learns and processes information or doesn't, because some people have learning disabilities, in meaning that they might learn in a different way than what has been historically the norm, and often get labeled, you know, with some bad labels. And not necessarily on the outside, but yes, but from the internal conversation of like, I'm not like them, I'm not learning like them, I must be fill in the blank. And it's usually not a positive label. But the reason why I'm telling you this is that um, these imprints um, are not necessarily a true reflection of reality. Yet, they determine the extent of the mind's imprints, determines the extent of what it sees possible for itself, and the reality in which it lives in. It starts shaping your perception. And so, in order to get to ground zero, that means pulling up all this programming and this wiring that was put there by the evolutionary brain, that part of you that is the survival part that functions out of fight, flight, or freeze. And we see this also in instructional settings. Sometimes, it's a spectrum. One side of the spectrum, you have ADHD or hyperactivity, and the other side of the spectrum, you have autism. And these are certain states of the nervous system that are related to being jacked up, um, reactive, and then the other side of the spectrum, which is related to shutting down or freezing. Um, and not to say they're a direct consequence of that, but it's definitely an aspect of it. And so these responses of our nervous system, of the survival brain, affect um, our perception, our mind's perception of the world, and the stories that it makes up. And well, I guess the best way of saying this is once you become friends, learn to become friends with your survival brain, then you can help rewire the programming and undo it, unwind it, and um, I guess you could say inform it, re-inform it with a bigger picture of your cognitive expansion that is not merely a product of these two um, sides of a duality, whether it's having a reactive nervous system versus a shut down nervous system. Because the truth is, sadly, few of us were given the tools to um, have an internal dialogue with the survival mechanism because they didn't even know it was there. They didn't even know it was running the show. And so this is a time of um, really, at least for me, um, and like I said, none of us are not impacted by each other. We are truly not independent. And so this year has been a year of clearing this unconscious ground like never before. And I like to call this the unconscious waters of the unconscious waters because it is a metaphor for the waters of life, which is emotion, the streams of emotion, which is life force, that are moving through us, that are a form of information. But that's not the end all, right? It's just one aspect of information that's telling us something, excuse me, about our environment. But if we aren't allowed to acknowledge that stream of information, it gets repressed and it gets pushed down into the unconscious. And then we just have this big personal cesspool of unconscious unacknowledged um, life force because we had to shut it down or tune it out or um, not acknowledge it um, because our experience was upsetting to somebody around us or there was no space for it. And so we learned to do that to ourselves. Hence the name of my website, Mind Heart Space. And how do we reclaim and clean and cleanse and move out all of that, um, a lot of it foreign energy that doesn't belong to us? We just picked it up along the way because we're diligent, caring, loving mirrors, and we reflect what we see. And as children, we do it without discernment because we don't have that critical discernment that we need to be able to determine what we're mirroring is actually a true reflection of reality or um, not. And anyhow, I go into much more detail about learning to identify um, your adaptive stress response of your nervous system, of your evolutionary nervous system, the one, the survival brain that was created to make you safe, and how once you identify that, you can start becoming friends with it and start rewiring it, reprogramming it. So you're no longer on autopilot or being run by it. You know, when we get triggered, it's automatic. There's rarely any space to say, hey, I think I was triggered. I think I'm responding to this person, not about what's happening right now, but on a unresolved emotional um, stacking that I've left over from when I was 3, you know? Um, or it wasn't just one time, right? These events that trigger a strong emotional reaction in our nervous system have charge. And unless that charge is dispersed and expressed and felt, it stays in our system and it becomes attractive. So it begins to bring more of the thing because it's vibrating at the same level of energy. And this is why a lot of people will come and say, gosh, I don't know why I keep attracting, the same kind of bosses, or I keep attracting the same kind of partner, or it's a different person, different body, same energy. And so this is part of creating a ground zero for ourselves for 2023. And I personally have been clearing. That's mostly what I've been doing this year is clearing out my personal emotional waters, that unconscious field that um, is not only my personal energy, but that I inherited. So it's intergenerational trauma. And that's really what I do when I work with people is I serve as a facilitator for helping them identify and clear that charge, that energy, that unprocessed um, emotion, and so they can get some space to start creating their lives on purpose instead of falling into this unconscious energetic pattern that is like autopilot. And so it is the full moon tonight, you might know, in Gemini. This is the house of communication, of reading and writing and speaking and learning. And so it's a perfect reflection of how this information gets imprinted um, on our psyche, in our psyche. And the good news is if it can be imprinted there, it can also be rewired. but it's learning is an embodied experience. A lot of times, people go into the classroom and think that it's purely a mental process, but it is an embodied process. We learn through doing, through interacting. Um, we have a sh- um, we have neural pathways that are made, our neurobiology that is made through interaction in social settings. So our woundings are created in relationship. Our healing will happen in relationship because that's how we shift that out of our bodies. And we are social creatures. And when we begin to create a level of alignment, and I like to say justice for ourselves in our own relationship with ourselves, where we can start showing up in our most authentic expression of who we are, that is not dependent or relying on this unconscious survival or evolutionary brain that it has been running most of us for most of our lives, that we can begin to take our place, our rightful place at the table of community, because we are not separate. And until we can reconcile our relationship with ourselves, it's very difficult to reconcile relationships with others, in putting um, ourselves in our rightful seat, for lack of a better word, our rightful seat. Um, and this means knowing the fullness of who we are, outside of this restrictive, um, necessary but restrictive survival brain that many of us have been identified with and restricted in. And um, and there is a much larger field at play. Uh, when you begin clearing all that out, the ground becomes available for something larger, which is you, your infinite um, expression that is led by inspiration and joy and play and connection, instead of the alternative, which has been the fear of pain, the fear of loss, um, fear of lack, um, and all of that implies. So, um, so I think I'm going to leave it there. I kind of went on longer today than I had planned, so forgive me. But I hope you got something of value if you stopped in and said hello, um, and took a listen. I'd like to thank you for stopping by. And I encourage you to leave an emoji or a comment, or share this if you got something of value or you know somebody that might benefit from this message. And if you'd like to find out more about my work, you can check out my website at www.mindheart-space.com. And it's good seeing you. I will post the date for the end of the year workshop, and I will let you know when that's up and invite you to register. All right, great seeing you all. And until next time, please remember what a valuable treasure you are. And bye for now.